Okay, welcome to this explainer. Today we're looking at a figure who practically needs no introduction, but somehow he remains completely shrouded in mystery. We're looking at the evolution of a polymath, and when I say polymath, I mean the ultimate Renaissance man. Painter, sculptor, architect, engineer, anatomist, inventor, you name it. Leonardo da Vinci's legendary curiosity and just boundless imagination didn't just contribute to European culture, they completely redefined the whole thing. So, we're about to unpack the sources that chronicle a mind that was literally centuries ahead of its time. But before we get into all those soaring achievements, I want you to focus on a number 20. Just 20. It's this stunning historical contrast that the single most famous artist in human history left behind fewer than 20 completed paintings. I mean, really think about that for a second. We hold him up as the absolute pinnacle of Western art, and yet his actual finished canvas output was incredibly small. It immediately makes you wonder, right? How did he secure such an immortal legacy? What on earth was he spending all of his time doing if he wasn't finishing his paintings? Well, that is exactly the puzzle we're going to solve today. Part 1. An unlikely beginning. So, Leonardo's story actually starts in a way that, honestly, by the rigid standards of his time, should have guaranteed him a life of total obscurity. He was born on April 15, 1452, near a little Tuscan hill town called Vinci. And he was born out of wedlock to a prosperous Florentine notary and a local peasant woman named Caterina. Now, in 15th century Italy, this was a massive obstacle. Because of his illegitimacy, he was legally barred from following his wealthy father into law or, any of the noble professions. And plus, he got very little formal schooling. But here's the crazy part. This rejection by traditional institutions actually became his greatest superpower. It forced him to become entirely self-taught. It sent him out wandering the hills of Tuscany, where he developed this profound, almost obsessive fascination with nature, animals, and geometry. And that untamed curiosity ultimately propelled him into a life-changing opportunity. Around 1466, when he was just 14 years old, he was apprenticed to Andrea del Verrocchio in Florence. Now, Verrocchio's workshop wasn't just someplace where you learned to paint. It was basically a high-tech Renaissance laboratory. It was this prestigious hub where Leonardo was cross-trained in sculpting, drafting, leatherworking, woodworking, and, this is absolutely crucial, metallurgy, chemistry, and mechanics. He wasn't just learning how things looked, he was learning how things actually worked. And wow, did that cross-training pay off fast. There is this famous and honestly pretty dramatic legend from the Renaissance regarding his master's masterwork, the baptism of Christ. So the story goes that Verrocchio allowed his young apprentice, Leonardo, to paint the angel on the far left of the panel. Well, Leonardo executed this angel with such breathtaking, luminous perfection that his master took one look at it, realized he had just been completely and utterly surpassed by a teenager, and vowed to never touch a paintbrush ever again. Now, whether that's entirely true or just slightly exaggerated, the fact remains. By age 20, Leonardo was officially recognized as a master in his own right. Moving on to part 2, art powered by science. So we're now entering the phase of his career where he truly breaks the mold. You see, for Leonardo, there was absolutely no dividing line between science and art. To him, they were just two sides of the exact same coin. He firmly believed that if you wanted to paint the human form, well, you had to understand the muscles and bones beneath the skin. If you wanted to paint a landscape, you had to understand botany and the physics of light. His rigorous scientific observation literally breathed life into his canvases. And to achieve this unprecedented realism, he perfected a couple of revolutionary techniques. The first one is sfumato. The word itself actually comes from the Italian word for smoke. See, instead of painting hard, rigid outlines around a face or an object, which is what most artists before him did, Leonardo painstakingly applied these microscopic layers of translucent paint. This softened the transitions between colors, allowing the borders to just blur and blend into each other perfectly. It's exactly how things appear in the real world when they're bathed in atmosphere. He paired that with a second iconic technique, chiaroscuro. This literally translates to light-dark. By utilizing stark, dramatic contrasts between deep shadows and bright highlights, Leonardo was able to completely trick the human eye. I mean, he took a totally flat piece of wood or canvas and made the subjects look like they had real, three-dimensional depth, almost like they were physically popping right off the wall. So the really crucial point here is how all these scientific techniques culminated in a series of specific masterpieces that completely changed the world. You can actually trace how rapidly his mastery evolves. You've got the Annunciation in his early 20s, which really showcases his amazing grasp of drapery.
Then there's the Vitruvian Man around 1490, just perfectly blending ancient Roman geometry with human anatomy. Then we have The Last Supper. And what's fascinating about this one is that his relentless need to experiment actually kind of betrayed him. Instead of using traditional wet fresco, which dries quickly, he decided to use an experimental oil and temper mix on dry plaster, just so he could take his time refining the shadows. And the result? The paint started decaying almost immediately. Yet, the emotional narrative of the piece is so powerful that it redefined Western art forever anyway. And, of course, the Mona Lisa, where he used extreme sfumato to create that famously mysterious, unreadable smile. He actually loved that painting so much, he refused to give it to the merchant who commissioned it, and he literally carried it around with him everywhere he went for the rest of his life.
Part 3. The Milan Notebooks. Now, what's really interesting is a massive, surprising pivot he made in 1482. Despite his huge success as a painter in Florence, Leonardo packed up, moved to Milan, and wrote what is basically the most audacious cover letter in history to the powerful duke there, Ludovico Sforza. This period fundamentally shifts our understanding of who Leonardo da Vinci really was. It takes him from a brilliant artist to just a full-blown visionary. So he didn't start his pitch to the Duke with, "Hey, I am the greatest painter in Italy." No, he pitched himself primarily as a rugged, innovative military engineer. He promised lightweight bridges, indestructible armored vehicles, advanced siege weapons, and then, almost as a casual, hilarious afterthought at the very end of the letter, he basically says, "Oh, and by the way, in times of peace, I can also paint and sculpt as well as any man." He was actively trying to escape the confines of just being a painter. So the Duke actually gave him the job and the freedom to explore, and Leonardo went to work, filling thousands upon thousands of pages in his personal notebooks, the famous codices. The subjects in these books read more like a science fiction novel than a 15th century diary. I mean, he was conceptualizing flying machines based on the wings of bats and birds. He drew early schematics for helicopters, armored tanks, and scuba gear literally centuries before the necessary materials even existed to build them. And to satisfy his desperate need to understand the human machine, he engaged in incredibly gruesome, illegal, late-night dissections of human corpses. He produced anatomical drawings of bones, the cardiovascular system, even fetuses that were so accurate, modern medical professionals are still marveling at them today. So yeah, this is where all his time was going. Which brings us to part 4. Final years and legacy. By 1516, Leonardo was this aging genius whose mechanical inventions were mostly either being ignored in a politically volatile Italy or just dismissed as impractical dreams. But the young King Francis I of France recognized his unparalleled brilliance. He invited Leonardo to leave Italy permanently, setting him up in a grand manor home called the Château du Clos-Lucé in Amboise. And you can really see the deep reverence the French king had for him in the official title he gave him, first painter, engineer, and architect to the king. But the most amazing part of this whole arrangement? King Francis asked practically nothing of him in terms of heavy manual labor. He didn't demand massive new paintings or complex engineering projects. The king simply wanted to converse with him. He just wanted the privilege of sitting with the master, absorbing his vast knowledge, and occasionally having him design some beautiful theatrical sets for the royal court's entertainment. Now, after moving to France, Leonardo's health did begin to fail. He suffered a stroke that left his right arm partially paralyzed. Yet his unyielding drive just wouldn't let him stop. He simply trained his left hand and kept right on sketching and writing until the very end. He passed away on May 2nd, 1519, at the age of 67. The Renaissance biographer of Vasari actually wrote this famously romanticized legend that King Francis cradled Leonardo's head in his arms as he drew his final breath. And while historians highly doubt the literal truth of that, it shows exactly how mythic his status had already become by that point. After his original church burial site was destroyed during the French Revolution, his presumed remains were excavated and beautifully reinterred in 1863 in the Chapel of St. Hubert, which, by the way, you can still visit today. So this all brings us to a really crucial question I want you to take away from this explainer today. We started out by noting that the ultimate Renaissance man finished fewer than 20 paintings. Yet he left behind tens of thousands of notebook pages filled with inventions, anatomical studies, and observations that literally changed the course of human history. So, is true genius measured strictly by the finished products we put out into the world? Or is it measured by the boundless, untamed curiosity we possess to explore the unknown? Leonardo da Vinci's life really suggests that the journey of understanding the universe might just be the greatest masterpiece of all. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep staying curious.